right, we're live. Well, hello, everybody here in the room, and um, good moron. I still don't know how to say it. Good morgon, something. I don't know. I'm gonna give up. Good evening, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are from. Sam just ended with like, oh, I hope it was not too boring, but this is gonna be a little bit boring because he stole a lot of my demos. Screw you, Sam. I'm glad he's gone. No, I'm kidding. Who was there for Sweat Arc yesterday? Who was at my session there? Well, it's only I didn't know people, so that's good. Because else it would be even more boring. Okay, I'm underselling myself. So, who am I? I'm Gerald. I'm on the .NET MAUI team at Microsoft. I work remotely from the Netherlands, and I'm here today and also actually yesterday talking about this thing where we are going to learn a little bit about SignalR, .NET MAUI, Blazor, all the things together. It's going to be amazing. I do some things on Twitter, so you still follow me there for as long as that will still work. Who knows? And I also do a little thing on YouTube where I have a little channel. So for the people at home, you're already at YouTube. Go to my channel, subscribe, like, do all the things. So that will be amazing. Um, so SignalR has been around for a long time already, actually, and it's built on top of ASP.NET. So we've already heard a lot of this from Sam. So there's definitely going to be some overlap, but hopefully you will still get something new from this. So it has been built on top of the ASP.NET stuff, and it is incredibly simple real-time communication for ASP.NET. But as we will see in this session, it's definitely not only for just web anymore. It goes far beyond that. So that's going to be really cool. So what are kind of like the scenarios that you think of whenever you want to do Signal R stuff, right? So you can do co-authoring. So if you are opening your Word document, nowadays you can have like the different cursors, right? So you will see what the other person is typing in real time. Google Docs, of course, that does the same thing. We have like the coding together thing for Visual Studio as well, where you can look at the same code together. Those kinds of scenarios is absolutely stuff, and probably the things that I mentioned for at least at Microsoft products, they might be actually using SignalR. They probably are. Um, Other things like real-time location-based tracking. So I came here with like bus and metros and whatnot, and I noticed in Google Maps that locations of that stuff was updating in real time. Or maybe Uber, you can do that as well, and you can see the car drive around. Those are scenarios that can totally work based off Signal R. So I will get back to the in-app notifications in a little bit, and of course, with all that real-time data coming in, you can also live update your live dashboard. So I see a big TV screen here and one in the back here in this room. So you could show all kinds of data, maybe your sales numbers or those Uber drivers driving around. If you are starting the next Uber, who knows? You can all see them driving around on that big screen, updating live with SignalR. Now, one thing that's always good to kind of clarify is so I specifically said here in-app notifications because SignalR, I think Sam already mentioned this, got a question as well with like, hey, can I run SignalR stuff inside of my .NET MAUI app? Yes, you can. Should you want to? Probably not. Because, especially if you're getting started with mobile development, your process, your application is kind of short-lived, right? You don't have all control over how long your app is going to run, when it's going to get killed. Like Android and iOS specifically, they kind of like decide if your app is in the background, like, hey, I need memory. Phew, your process is gone. So then when that happens, also your Signal R connection is gone, right? So if you want to have like those push notifications, that integration inside of your OS, your operating system with Android and iOS, where the notifications show up on your lock screen, that is not something that you can do with Signal R. Actually, that is stuff that is, you have to go through the Apple and Android servers because they lock it down with some security, because you don't want to get spammed with push notifications, right? You don't want people to hook in there. So that is always a good thing to clarify. But if you have your app open, if you know your user is going to have your app open, you probably don't want to depend on it. But again, like let's take Uber as an example, and there is a new request coming in. You probably also want to send a push notification, but you could definitely use SignalR inside of your app to pop something as well. So then, what is SignalR exactly from a more technical standpoint? It is a wrapper around a standardized products, basically web technologies like WebSockets and long polling. They have been around a long time, and it's available for all these languages: C Sharp, F Sharp, Visual Basic, if you're still doing that, even Java, and it's open source and open protocol, right? So you can write your own implementation for the own programming language that you might have lying around. You probably have not, hopefully. Just for fun, maybe. But you can do it for all these languages. Maybe there's even implementations that I don't know about for any of these languages, but you can definitely do that if that's something that you're missing. And the really cool thing is it starts with like the best technology available. So that's probably going to be WebSockets. And then whenever that's not available, this is probably more your web browser scenario. So if you're still running Internet Explorer for whatever reason, then WebSockets might not be available, and it will gracefully fall down, go through all these other technologies here, and you won't even notice that anything is happening. Basically, like some features might be less real time-ish, but ideally you don't notice anything and it will still just work. You don't have to do anything special for that. So that is the really cool thing about all of this. And if you're using this with like .NET MAUI and probably Blazor, then it's always going to be like the best one. It not doesn't really have like the other technologies anyway. So how does that work? Like again, if you're going to implement this, it's called with hubs and hub proxies. So kind of like on the server side, you're going to add a hub. That's what it's called because that's where all the signals are going to go to and being spread from basically. So you have this one central server. Which of course can be in Azure and scale and all those kinds of things. And what you're basically going to do is do remote procedure calls, right? You're going to invoke a piece of code on either the client or the server. So in this case, a signal is going from the server to the clients. So Sam, and I'm going to show it as well because it's always the favorite demo, is the chat app. Um, and what might have happened here is that a message got sent to the server, and then you're going to notify a client with the clients because you can get a list of all the connected clients, and then get the one with a specific ID, and then you can say my client function, right? So that is the function that's going to be invoked on that proxy that we have here on the client side on the right, and then that piece of code that is hooked up there, or it might not be hooked up. That can happen if that's a scenario that you have. Then it's going to execute code here. And if you do the other way around, you can also invoke code on the server. So this might be the chat message coming in. So I am on my client with my cat right here, and I'm going to compose a little message, send that to the server, and then I'm going to say hub connection because I have a connection, a real-time connection also to the server. I'm going to send async, and I'm going to say my server function. It has to be like with the magic strings, right? Because you don't have a strongly typed definition going on here. So you have to get that right. So my server function could also be send chat message. And then that chat message is going to be received on the hub. It's going to invoke a little code. And then from there, maybe it's going to spread back to all the clients, which is basically like the other slide, right? So you're going to have this back and forth thing. So that's how it works. We'll see that all of that in a little demo. So don't worry. And there's also a hosted version, as with a lot of these things. So you also have like the Azure SignalR service. I think it has some limitations and some things that are good to know. I'm not going to go over this one for this session too much, but I just want you to know that this one is out there for you to use, which makes it a little bit more easier to manage and not have to write your own web application for some extent. So that is one of the options as well. So let's go to a little demo, and this is actually it's interactive, so don't feel bad if you take out your phone now. Also at home, this is going to be a fun one. So go to gerald.fyi/vote. And while you do, I'm going to do that as well. So make sure that you get there, gerald.fyi/vote. I'm going to go there, and please don't use my link that you're about to see on the screen right here because that's my super secret admin portal. Gerald.fyi/vote. It will route you to a little Azure thingy here, and I'm going to do admin is 42, so that's my secret password. Oops. Is that not correct? Uh-oh, I forgot the question mark. Phew. All right. So, how are you liking Gerald today? Well, you can vote on my session. This is kind of overwhelming. It's unanimous. You all like me. Thank you. That's great. Okay, I'll be honest. I built in a little cheat mode, so you can press whatever, but it's always going to be awesome. So, thank you. I'll show you in a little bit. So if you, and you also probably noticed that if you refresh your application, it's just going to reset your vote. You can vote again, right? So it's not really disabled. There should be some validation for that. But if you keep it in a mode where you have voted once and it says like, hey, voting is disabled, keep it at that. And if you stare at your screen and I'm going to press the reset button here, then you will see in real time that your vote gets reset. You can see the thing here. And now also the cheat mode gets disabled. So now you can really tell me what you think of this. But I'm logging every one of you. So watch out. Yeah, the voters. I can find you. I can find you. All right. So this is, one of the fun things that you can definitely do with this. And you can see it updates in real time, right? I see one person who's very skeptical here in the front. Did you vote meh? I will look it up right in front of everyone. All right. So this is one of the things. So let's see how this kind of works. So let's hop into Visual Studio here, and I have the voting poll, and this is kind of like your classical scenario. Let me first close all of this. Close all tabs. I do the top tabs. Maddie's not here anymore, but she said like, oh, you can't see the titles of the top tabs. It's a setting in Visual Studio. You can just set it to more characters. Um, anyway, so it starts kind of like this is your typical ASP.NET application. Under the hood, it's probably a separate NuGet package that gets brought in for SignalR, but you don't have to do that manually anymore. So if we just go to the program CS, the entry point for our ASP.NET application, you can just here say, hey, we already have this add razor pages probably, depending on which template you choose, but you might have that already. And we have add SignalR. You can just do that. Builder, services, add SignalR. It will wire everything up and you can start using SignalR. If you're going to do this, like it's Friday now, so if you're going to do this over the weekend, you're like, yes, I want to get started right away. Make sure that you get like this add SignalR and not SignalR core. That's like for the really power user scenario. I don't even know what it's for, but that only brings in like the very minimal stuff, and that will not make it work without doing some other advanced stuff. So make sure that you get the add SignalR one, and then otherwise, what you want to do is do something with those hubs, right? That we saw. Um, so here, what you want to do is use endpoints, and we're going to register the endpoints of where you can reach your SignalR hub. Now, in this case, this project is like kind of like the hub, so the server and the client in one project. So that's kind of like confusing, right? Typically, you would probably have two. One server and one client, and they would talk to each other. So here, there's kind of like confusing things that might be going on where it's kind of talking to itself. But I'll tell you that in a little bit. And here we have like this voting hub. So we're registering that with the endpoint slash voting hub. So if I would go back to my little web thingy here, and I would not do admin is 42, but I would do slash voting hub, you would see that it actually says like, hey, connection ID required, right? So it tells me something is going on here, something is responding here, but I'm not sending it the right message, right? Because this is based on a protocol and I need to provide it with the right input. But something is going on here. My hub is running. So that is great. So that is how we register the endpoints. That's how we make this thing available. And then we have this voting hub. So let's go look at that, which is just a regular class, but it inherits from hub, right? So this is a built-in type for SignalR. This is what has a lot on board already for handling the connection, for sending messages, receiving messages, all those things. And you just have to put over your little sauce of your own to make it all work for your scenario. So I have this one thing, vote state. We already saw that also in the program CS. So I registered this as a singleton. Let's see, how interactive are we? Anyone want to guess why that is? You can't see it at home, but there's like people, they're like, oh yeah, pick me, please. No, they're not. So you want to register this as a singleton because it's a web application, right? So when I prepared this demo, I have no clue what I'm doing. So I'm just, I'm typically doing .NET MAUI stuff. So I just add it as a transient because this is the scope for your dependency injection, right? So transient, so you get a new instance each time. And now I suddenly have all these vote state objects, which register the votes separately, right? So it doesn't make sense because I want to have the total votes. So you want to have a singleton so that all the votes go to that same object and I can actually show the votes in the UI here. So I have this vote state thing, which is very simple. It has a cheat mode, true or false. And I can say, hey, I have a dictionary of two integers where the first integer is like the category. So 0 is awesome, 1 is meh. And the second one is the vote counting, right? So I initialize that with a new dictionary and off we go. So there's that. And I was looking at the hub, which closed again. So there it is. So we have that one. I inject this through dependency injection, right? That's how it works with ASP.NET. You just register it, and it works with dependency injection. And then I have these methods, right? Disable cheat mode. We'll see that in a little bit, and send vote. And these are the things that I can invoke. So you just have to kind of like remember these names here, and you have to get those right in your strings. But those are the things that you can invoke on my hub. And if I do, I'm going to get that vote state. So this is the disable cheat mode, so that resets the votes. And it will set the cheat mode to false. It will reset all the votes. And then it will do clients.all.send async. So this is from my hub sending to all of my clients, in this case, a little signal with, hey, reset. And I'm setting that votes dictionary over as well to get serialized to JSON, to wherever it's going. And then it will put that as a parameter in the receiving client. So I'm doing that. I'm actually sending two. So reset and update votes. Again, this is like the client and server in one go. So we'll see how that all wires up. And here I have the send vote. So this is kind of like the incoming thing for like whenever you send from the client, like, hey, I want to register this vote. And then, of course, the option that you chose, right? And whenever the cheat mode was still on, it's also always going to be 0. So always going to be awesome. And then I'm just going to plus plus on the dictionary. And again, I'm going to send to all of my clients, hey, update the votes. And in this case, the client is just me, right, showing that graph. To let us know that we have new votes incoming. Now, here with these clients, you can have all. You also have like other APIs. We have all or all except. So if you go back to like your chat application scenario, it would not make very much sense to send the message also back to me, right? I already sent the message. So you can send all except for me, basically, or there's probably other scenarios that you can come up with. You can get the caller client. You can get a group, so you can group people together. You can actually identify users if that's what you want. So there's all kinds of scenarios that you can support with this, and build a list of the clients that you want to actually reach with the little signals that you're sending here. Now, like I said, this is more your traditional approach, and you can use SignalR with all these kinds of things. And originally, it was built for ASP.NET, which uses a lot of JavaScript as well. So here in my www root, I have this JavaScript thing. Actually, it's probably more useful to actually show you the pages first. So I have this index page, which is a Razor page, right? ASP.NET. I do the little thing with is admin yes or no, and then I show a little bit of a different. It's very simple code. It's demo code. Don't judge me. So this is showing like the chart, right? It's on a canvas, and I just brought in a existing JavaScript library that shows charts and updates things, and then I have that reset button. So more on that later. If you're not an admin, you're going to see the vote the client that you saw on your phones, right? Or if you're on your desktop at home, you saw it maybe on your desktop. And you can do vote below, and you have the two buttons, right? So we have those that you can use to actually vote. Now, then I'm bringing in some scripts. So we have like with npm, you can download half of the internet and the SignalR JS library. You can put that in here. You just wire it up like this, and it will do all the SignalR magic for you. And then I have two little scripts, one for the client, one so that's for you, and one for the server, where I wire up some things. And here I have my chart library that's going to actually show that little bar chart here. So if we now go to the working parts of this for our JavaScript, so let's start with the client. Um, this is something that we're going to see more often in the other clients as well, because they made this very similar, so that you kind of like um, 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 uh, recognize what you see here, and you already know in like other solutions as well, like, hey, okay, this is how I should use this. So we have SignalR.hub connection builder. In this case, I'm not specifying any address, which indicates that it should connect to a local host, basically. So that's what it's going to do, and then it's going to specify that endpoint, right? So it's just going to be /voting hub, and then slash dot build. So it's going to build the connection string for this, and now I can use that connection. And what I'm going to do is do some vanilla JavaScript, no jQuery or anything like that. I'm just going to say, hey, document get element by ID. So that's the awesome button. That is one of the buttons that was on your client, and we're going to listen to the click here. And whenever we do the connection dot invoke, and here we see that send vote, right? And this is the same as this send vote right here. That should match. That's the one thing that it's going to invoke. And then here you can see we have this parameter, right? So this is comma 0, because this is the awesome option. So here we can see that will be filled in here. And if I just add a string foo here, and I add another parameter here, I can catch that value as well, right? So that's how you can just add parameters and transfer all your data like that. Let's just remove this before I break things that are not supposed to break. Oops. Um, and when something happens, I do console error. And whenever you have done this, whenever it's invoked, whenever you've clicked it, I'm going to do thanks for your vote. Voting is now disabled. Disable the buttons, and it's not going to do the default button behavior. Reset things. So this is like whenever I set. So here you can see like you're sending a signal to me, right? Like to the server. So you're going to do connection.invoke. And here we have the other way around. Here we're going to say connection on. So this is basically your event that we register. So whenever I send a reset from the server to your clients, it's the reset, right? And I'm going to do the status label. I'm going to set voting has been reset. So that's what you should have seen happening whenever I press the reset button. And the disabled is false, so you can vote again. And the same thing, of course, for that meh, but now with the option of 1, right? So that's the difference here. I could have definitely reused some of this code, but again, it's demo code. Then the last thing that I'm going to do, because JavaScript, unless you do some special things, is just going to run from top to bottom. So it wired up all these things, and now it said like, hey, connection.start. So it's going to actually start that real-time connection. And then we have this function, which is not doing anything, but whenever something goes wrong, it's going to go to the console. But my code is always perfect. That's also why I don't write tests. So that's how that worked. And then on the other side, it's very similar, of course. I'm again making this connection to the same hub. And now I'm going to update the votes, right? So I get that signal for the update votes. I get the actual dictionary in here, which is just a JSON thing, right? So I can use everything like a collection here. I can just pull that all out of there and pull that into my chart library. So I'm filling those data sets. You can see the bars going up. And then whenever I press the reset button, I'm going to do connection invoke. So I'm going to send something again. Disable cheat mode. So again, that is the thing that you see here, right? This has to match with no parameters this time. And then basically we are full circle, right? So we're going to do the connection.start to actually start the connection. And now everything falls in place and start working. So that is how this charting thing work. Again, I'm going to clean this up later. Bye-bye. So that's all of that. Let's see if I can pull up some slides again. And so the rest of the demos is going to be a chat app thingy, which thank you, Sam, again for ruining that. Uh, yeah, I noticed. I was gonna duplicate. Thank you. So I actually was trying to pull together a new demo, which allowed you to control the flashlight on my device. I'll get to that, how that all would work. And I think it works in theory. The only thing that prevents me from actually showing it right now is that I couldn't deploy it to Azure on time. So Sam actually had to talk a little bit longer. Anyway, maybe I'll pull it together while right after this session, and I could still make it happen. So the Blazor, I think there were some people who were new to .NET, right? Who does not know what Blazor is? Well, we just watched Sam talk because okay, there's 2 people, so this is for you. Um, and the joke always is like it's web development without JavaScript, right? And you can still use JavaScript if that's what you want, but kind of like Blazor, it is a single page application framework that we've built on top of all the things that are ASP.NET. So if you think about these single page applications, you have these rich applications with like grids and dialogues and a fancy menu on the left, and then if you go to that same application on your mobile device, it's nice and responsive and everything falls in line and it still looks great and works amazing. But if you think about these frameworks, then it's typically built on top of Angular or React or Vue, right? And those are all JavaScript frameworks. Now, I can joke here all day about how bad JavaScript is, and in that time that I do, probably 20 new JavaScript frameworks will come out. So let's not do that. But it's not really about JavaScript, right? It could also be TypeScript or Rust or any other language. Just the fact that you have to switch between different languages means that it will eat into your productivity, right? Like if I would have actually, while I was preparing that demo for that like that voting thing, I needed to switch to JavaScript, and I was like, okay, how do I do this thing again, or jQuery or whatnot, and I have to look it up, and because I don't do it often enough, so it will just eat into your productivity. So how cool would it be if we could just stick with C#, JavaScript you can also do in Visual Studio, but if you can still stay inside of Visual Studio, the tooling that you know and love, the consistent ecosystem, so you don't have to go out suddenly to npm, download half of the internet in npm packages. You can just download a quarter of the packages with NuGet, which is much better. And we have 20 years of .NET framework. So there is a lot of stability and proven concepts there that we can build upon. So that's what Blazor is. And now we have a nice single page application framework that will allow you to write most of the things, all the things in C sharp. Like I said, you can still do JavaScript if you really want or if you really need something, but that's basically what you can do with this. So this fits in nice together with all the web UI frameworks that we already have. MVC Razor pages, we just saw that. Single page application SPA, we already have that for. We already have templates based on actual Angular. So if you still want to do that, totally fine. But you can now also use Blazor. And what is funny is that we also have, of course, the services that do not really have any UI. So you can already see SignalR in there. gRPC is one, and of course the HTTP Web API stuff that is there as well. So we have a very complete set of everything that you can do here. Now I think Sam already talked a little bit about this as well. We have two versions of Blazor basically. So one is Blazor Server, and if you've been using that, you might have not even known that you were already using SignalR because that's what it uses to go back and forth to the server to actually update the UI because it's a single page application. So only the parts that need to change are going to change inside of your web browser. And with Blazor Server, it's still going to go back and forth to the server and actually, send every signal. And that happens through a SignalR connection. So if you maybe, I think the .NET frontend website is built with Blazor something, Blazor Server. So if I went there on my phone and I went back, again on iOS, I have an iOS device. You don't really have control over how long your application will live. So I go back to my browser, and then the screen is a little bit dimmed, right? And it shows a little spinner because it's trying to reconnect. And that's like, especially that's really SignalR trying to reconnect to the website, trying to establish that real-time connection again. So that is all Blazor and SignalR. You've already watched it today on the .NET Frontend website. Then we have Blazor WebAssembly, and that's kind of closer to your traditional JavaScript approach, right? So you download the whole application basically. We have a little WebAssembly, which is a intermediate layer where you compile your C# to. Can also be Rust or C++ or whatever. WebAssembly is not something we invented. We just made C# compatible with it, and now you can run the whole application inside of your browser directly. What is really cool, of course, like sorry, I was going to say something else. So what you have to do then is also download the .NET runtime. Then, as of .NET 6, I think we brought that down to 1 MB. .NET 7 even more, maybe, I don't know. So your average cat GIF is kind of like bigger, right? But still, if you have scenarios where bandwidth and download sizes matter, then that's definitely something that you want to look into. So whenever you have options, you also have like pros and cons, right? I'm not going to read them all to you. I think the important parts are like down there. If you do Blazor Server, you have to have that persistent connection, right? So offline applications, not really an option. You have a higher UI latency because every click is going to go back and forth. So by default, by definition, you're going to have that UI latency if you're going to even notice it or not. But if you're going to go with WebAssembly, you have that larger initial download size. And you don't really have control over the runtime performance, right? It might be downloaded to a phone or a thin client. And whereas if you run it on a server, you control like how beefy that server is, right? So you know a little bit about how fast it will run, yes or no. So now we have three flavors. I'll get to the hybrid in a little bit. We have the Blazor Server, we have the Blazor WebAssembly, and with Blazor Hybrid, you can do even more amazing stuff. You can run it on your client devices, but we'll get to that. So let's start with my little gigantic chat app demo. Hop into the next solution here. So I created a little solution with all kinds of clients here. Um, and you can see them here on the right. So I have this Blazor client. I'm going to show that right now. Then I have this hubs. So this is like my server that I just had as well, but this time it doesn't have a UI. It just runs as a server just to only get the signals and send the signals out. So I'll just start that in the background in a little bit. Then I have a Maui Blazor. So that's your Blazor hybrid scenario. The really native Maui client that uses that as well. And I have this reusable chat component. So I think again, Sam stole a lot of my thunder there again, where he said like, hey, the components you can use that throughout the project, right? So I'm definitely going to do that as well. So let's start with the chat hub, which is a very simple thing. Again, the program CS, I just do this thing, add SignalR. If you are a little bit familiar with web development, then you probably wake up screaming sometimes if I talk about cores. So to just overcome that, I think while preparing this demo, there was some stuff going on with this. So I just said, hey, disable this whole thing. This has to do with like being able to reach your web application from different addresses. Very good that it's there. It allows for all kinds of security things if you leave this open, but it's demo code. I cannot say this enough. Um, and again, I'm registering the endpoint. So just the chat hub this time, no Razor pages with this chat hub right here. And in here, it's just one method right now, which is a send message. And I get a user and a message. And I'm going to send to all the clients like, hey, I received a message. And then in the clients, I'm going to have some code to actually show the new messages that are coming in. So let me just run this in the background so that we can reuse it and I don't forget. And all my demos will fail. So let's debug, start without debugging, and it will bring up a little console thingy that will spin up this ASP project. And while it's doing that, did it already do it? Was it faster than? Wow. Oh no, this is a closed one. So why did not? Typically, this goes very fast, so I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, there we are. So it starts it and hides it immediately. So this is just listening to, HTTPS, HTTP. It's listening to calls. All right, so we got that running. Not important anymore. So let's have a look at our Blazor client right here, which is a typical Blazor, file new Blazor application, nothing fancy. And what we have here is now no more JavaScript. So if I go into the pages and the index, what you will see is I have brought in the SignalR client NuGet package. So for this one, I think you have to install it manually. So you bring in that one, and then you can start using that connection basically. So what I have here is a little UI for actually entering your message. So you have like your HTML stuff, input, your name, which I bind through some major Blazor magic, excuse me, to the username. I have this little message right here, and then I have a button with a on click that's going to send that username and message. And then here I have a little for each for the messages that are coming in. I'm going to show that in a little list, and they will show up on top of each other. So instead of having to do the JavaScript here, I can now just write this all in C#. If you haven't seen Blazor that much, don't worry. This very much looks like PHP. That's what it reminds me of, like all the spaghetti code and mixing everything up. You can definitely put this in a code behind as well instead of this code block. So there's a lot of options here. But what you can do is now do this hub connection. So this is the same thing as we saw in JavaScript. Actually, this is almost the same exact syntax that we were using here, right? So we have this hub connection. I'm going to do this again. Local host, which is a fun thing that I'll get to in a little bit. If I forget, please remind me of this. So we have this local host. I'm going to do the connection builder, HTTPS, this IP address, the port number, chat hub, and then I'm going to register again this signal right here. So I have this hub connection on, but here I can strongly type the things, right? So I can say, hey, I expect two strings to be coming in, the user and the message, and I'm going to do this on the receive message, which was the hub that we saw here, right? So we're sending this receive message signal again that has to match, and then inside of that, I'm going to wire up this message received. And then I'm going to do the hub connection dot start async. And then in the message received, I'm not doing anything fancy here. I'm going to say, hey, messages, which is a little collection that I have here on top, messages. And then I'm going to add this entry to that messages. And this is a Blazor thing. State has changed. It knows that it has to update the UI and actually show my messages here. And of course, I have this send async as well with the username and message. And I'm going to do hub connection, send async. Again, this has to match send message with the thing here, and is going to invoke this on the server, and then I'm going to reset the username and the message. So whenever I set this as my starter project, Blazor client, and I can run this, it's going to bring up a little browser window, and I can actually send this message to the hub. But it's not very fun because this is a chat app and I'm only talking to myself, right? So we probably better extend that. I'm already going way over time, but I'm sure I should talk even faster. It's going to be fun. Well, you'll believe this, right? Just taking a little time. Again, I don't know why. This is not an old MacBook like Sam. Oh, experienced, I should say, experienced MacBook. So I say Gerald, Blazor. I said, hey, send, and you can see it showing up here, right? So we got that under control. Okay, quickly, on to the next one. So what is .NET MAUI? .NET MAUI is really cool. .NET MAUI is the evolution of Xamarin Forms. So if you have been using Xamarin Forms, is there anyone who has been using Xamarin Forms before? All right, awesome. Then you know already a little bit of what this is. So we have Xamarin Forms, which has been our offering for like cross-platform apps based on C# and .NET, running on iOS, Android, and UWP. So early on, we would have this graphic and say like which Xamarin approach is the best for you, and even without reading anything, all the things that are on here, which you really can't because it's very small and pixely. But it says like Xamarin Forms is best for, and then in the screenshots you can see it's a couple of boring boxes, right? And that's always what kind of stuck with us, like Xamarin Forms, kind of like a boring image. So we needed to change that. And if you want to do the real fancy stuff, then you had to use Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android, and you could use media players and games and maps and all that kind of cool stuff, which is totally stuff that you could do with Xamarin Forms as well. But the stories, I don't know if it's true or not, have it that Xamarin Forms was architected for like, hey, the data entry applications, the forms applications, and people started doing all kinds of cool stuff with it, but they would run into performance issues because it just wasn't architected to do that way. So now we came up with .NET MAUI, .NET Multi-Platform App UI, and yeah, that's our new offering for cross-platform apps based on C#, .NET, iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS. So you can see the platforms here shifted also already a little bit. UWP is not supported anymore by Microsoft, so we're naming it Windows now because it's based on WinUI, and macOS is no longer something that is supported by the community, but is now a first class platform that we are supporting as well. So if you put a little marketing sauce over that, it's the most productive way to develop native apps that perform great on any device running on iOS, Android, macOS, and Windows from a single code base. Very simplified, what that means, you have a UI activity indicator and a progress bar, which is a circle. I don't know. Sure. It's Android. That's how it works. And we have these controls, right? That's how they look and feel on these platforms. And what we do with .NET MAUI, again, very simply put, is we put a abstraction layer on top of that. We say, hey, we call it an activity indicator. And then whenever you specify an activity indicator in your application, it's going to translate itself into the thing that it's supposed to look like and feel on the platform that you're running on. Same for a UI slider or a button or a label or whatever you are using inside of your application. So that's basically what .NET MAUI does. I'm going to skip over this really quick. What we also have, and that was the demo that I was pulling together, what I was saying, it was a little joke from Sweatdog where Maddie was talking about, oh yeah, you can do also the flashlight API. So I was going to do a remote flashlight thingy that you could light up here, and that's part of the Essentials API. So the Essentials APIs is now just APIs inside of .NET MAUI that you can use for all kinds of common functionality across platforms. So you can have your geolocation, you can have your camera, but also your flashlight and all kinds of other things that are now just available from the C# layer. So you don't have to do all kinds of advanced stuff. It will just work on all these devices. So if we pull that into the little demo right here, I will get into the .NET MAUI app. We have that one, and I should probably stop running this one. But I can also start running it without debugging so that I have it in the background still. So let's do that with this one too. And I have this Blazor application running. Cool, cool, cool. And what I'm also going to bring up is the .NET MAUI app. So one of the things that we try to do with .NET MAUI and also like with the SignalR connection, and basically it's a theme across all of .NET and what we're trying to do is make things more familiar, right? Because cross-platform development is hard. And what you will see here in this MAUI program is that we've adopted also kind of like the application model, the bootstrapping model, the generic host builder from ASP.NET, right? So if you know how to work with ASP.NET and you're curious about getting started with cross-platform development, at least if you go in here, you will see some familiar things, right? You can also here register all your things for dependency injection. That will work all the same. It will work with the constructor injection. So at least you will see some familiar things to get you started, because there is still enough to learn about .NET MAUI. So here we have this native application. This all works based on XAML. You can also do it on with C#. Again, you have to bring in the NuGet package for the ASP.NET SignalR client. So you can see that using here at the top as well. And for the rest, we can use the exact same code actually. So that hub connection, you can see the messages. So this is a little bit different, right? I have to handle the UI a little bit differently because we're now going to use native UI in a native platform. I'm going to do messages.clear. I have this very secret IP address. Oh, and I needed to get back to that. Thank you for reminding. I'm going to set up that connection, right? Exactly the same way, but now with an IP address. And I'm going to register that same kind of callback, receive message, message received. And this time I'm going to do the message received. I'm going to add it to these messages. Which is here a observable collection, which is hooked up to my XAML right here, because in .NET MAUI, it would be, it makes sense to use a collection view, which is our kind of like our control for showing repeated items, right? So it's a collection view, it's a list, and you can specify a data template. So in this case, I'm just going to do a label, and I'm going to bind that to my messages collection. So each time something comes in, a new item is added to these messages automatically because that's data binding, and that will show up in this list. Now, I'm going to run this on the Android emulator. So I'm going to switch over here to the MAUI client, run this on the Android emulator. And that's the reason why I need to use this IP address. So if you're going to get started with this, again, there's a whole weekend in front of you. You can do all this fun stuff that you're going to learn today. But the Android emulator, if you're going to connect to localhost, you need to kind of like realize that this Android emulator, or if you're going to do it on a physical device, this is going to be your local host, right? So imagine that this is a separate device. And now you're talking to localhost on your device, which is not where your SignalR server is running. So that's a pitfall that a lot of people fall into. So what you want to do is actually look up the IP address, go to your console window, do ipconfig, and you will find your IP address, put that in here, and now suddenly it will talk to each other. There might be some stuff with your firewall and that kind of stuff to figure out, but at least you've gone through that first hurdle. So now I can do Gerald Maui. I didn't design this UI very well, so my keyboard overlaps my thing here, and I can say hey, and I can say send, and it should show up here for myself. But now if I go back to my browser and my Blazor thing, you can also see it here, right? So I can again do Gerald Blazor here, and I can say hey hey. I don't know if that's a thing, but hey hey. Oops, come here. And it doesn't do it. No, why not? What happened? Oh, there it is. It took a little while. Okay, not sure why. So it did show up, right? So it should be real time, but I don't know. My computer is a little bit slow for some reason, and it updates on both of these clients, right? So let's see if I can make it a little bit more interesting in the last kind of 5 minute ish that I have. Because what happens if we mix these two? I already said, like, hey, we have also a thing, a scenario where we can put Blazor and .NET MAUI together, right? Now everything, yeah, everything died here. So that's going to be interesting. I'm going to describe what you should be seeing. I'll just talk while this is loading. So what we also have is like we have .NET MAUI and Blazor, which we call either .NET MAUI Blazor or Blazor Hybrid, depending on who you ask. And what's going on with that is that you can run your Blazor application inside of a .NET MAUI app. Now, while I was sitting here during the other session, there was already a question in the chat like, hey, can I access the native APIs, the native sensors from my Blazor application on my device? And the answer is kind of like yes and no. If you're running a Blazor application on the web and you access that through your browser, then no, you're bound to the same sandbox that your browser has, luckily, but because it's just another web page. But if you run this Blazor hybrid, so if you run the Blazor application as a .NET MAUI application, then you can use 100% of all the sensors of all the things. You don't have any sandbox. You can do everything on the device. So that's really cool. So we have this thing called Blazor running on the web. We have this thing called .NET MAUI running on all these platforms. What if we put them together, combine the both of these worlds, and we call it Blazor Hybrid, and we can do all this amazing stuff. So with .NET MAUI Blazor, oh, do I? Oh, sorry, people at home. Technical difficulties as always. Something went wrong. Oh no. Yeah, we know that. So anyone want to sing a song? Maybe a question in between someone while we're doing this? Do, do, do. I will sing that if no one else does. Do, do, do. I don't know why this is so slow. I'm sorry about this.
Is it getting close, or should we take the questions? Because we do have some questions.
Oh, that's me. Do one question at least.
Do one question at least.
Yes.
Okay. So let's do. Where's the? How can I do type safe? Can I do clients.all dot reset async instead of clients.all dot send async reset?
If I understand the question correctly, then no, you can't. Like you have to specify with strings what the thing is that you're going to invoke because you don't really have a type safe thing. Maybe I don't know. We're gonna come up. SignalR has been around for a long time, so there's probably reasons why we don't have it yet, where we have some kind of definition with what are the the functions, the methods that are available on the client or the server, so that you can maybe strongly type it a little bit more to help you. But no, right now you have to actually put in those strings and um, um, connect that way.
Got it.
This is not going well.
It's not going well. Do you want another question?
Do another question. I'm not sure if this is actually gonna come back up, but let's see. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a question since you're overlapping a lot with the previous speaker,
Hmm.
Sam. We do have a question that wasn't brought up during his session.
Hmm.
Why does a hybrid app take so long for the loading, like the
Ah,
loading dot dot?
I was there. I was ignoring that one. Bites me now. All right.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, no worries.
I'm
So
putting you on the spot here.
yeah. So I don't know. It kind of like depends. Like in this case, it's because my machine is just really slow for whatever reason. And I would think my first kind of idea would be that it is because a debug build just does a lot of stuff that does not happen in a release build. So try if it actually happens in a release build as well, because it takes some seconds to load. But also, like if you know a little bit about how Blazor works, it uses some reflection to start up because you're registering all the endpoints where the pages are going to be, how to reach them. So it takes a little bit of bootstrapping and time to actually scan your assembly, do some reflection, and actually start up your application. So that's probably why there is a little bit of a performance hit there. But I'm pretty sure that it goes down. That loading time goes down whenever you actually do a release build and actually have all the optimization there.
Awesome.
Is it shared again, Jimmy? All
Oh, we're
right.
back.
Exactly on time. So thank you so much. Oh my gosh, this is the worst. I'm sorry. Um, I'll just keep it like this to not switch around too much, right? To see if we can keep things a little bit stable. Get my embarrassing notes out here. All right. So with .NET MAUI Blazor, you can build cross-platform native apps, right, that run on Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, all the platforms that are also running .NET MAUI, because we already have the .NET runtime running there. So we just made Blazor there available as well, and you can use all your existing Razor class libraries for that stuff as well. That's also what Sam said, right? You can even get third-party Razor class libraries. They are amazing. Probably Telerik has them as well, like Razor class libraries and components pre-built for you that you can use. Just plug them into your application and you can use them without any issues. And like I already said, you have that full platform device access, right? So inside of your Blazor application running on the web, you're bound to that sandbox. You cannot format your hard drive. Luckily, if you don't go to the wrong website, it will format your hard drive. That's not great. The good news is with a .NET MAUI Blazor application, you can totally format your hard drive, right? So that's one of the fun things that you can absolutely do. Let's skip over some of this. Actually, I'm just going to go to the demo right here. So for the last thing, I have this .NET MAUI Blazor application. Let's just close this one. Maybe that helps too. And this is still running. What we have here is kind of like, it should look familiar by now. We have this Maui Blazor client. So we have the best of both worlds. We have this Maui program, we have XAML, but we also have Razor pages. So you can see we have a platforms folder where you can still write your platform specific code for .NET Maui apps if that's what you want. But we also have these Razor pages. And if we go in here again, the code is pretty boring. I should have actually shown you this probably in the other apps as well. So I have this my chat component, right? which we have here down at the bottom as well. And this is actually where all the magic happens. This is one of those reusable components. And to set it up is really easy. You just take that Razor component, put it inside of a separate project. You can also put it in the NuGet from there, distribute it to everyone. And inside of this Razor component, everything happens. So here I have a little piece of, again, I hooked it up, of course, to the SignalR client. So this is basically the UI that I showed you earlier, like with the name, the message, and whatnot. The messages, it hooks everything up. Um, and if we look at like the Blazor client earlier, so the only thing that's happening here in this index, oh, I actually have all the code here. So what I took here, I could replace all of this also with like that chat component. So that's what's happening here. And then I have that already now for my Blazor client. So I could again repeat all this code, or what I did now, put it inside of a Razor component right here, and you can reuse it all this way. And if I run this one, so I have this on another Android emulator. So that's probably why my computer is running so hot, although it worked fine yesterday. Um, so I have this one here, and this is going to be, look again, very familiar because that's going to be Blazor, but now inside of a .NET MAUI app. I have a native .NET MAUI app. I have this little browser right here. I have it all together, and if I want to go really crazy, I can also start a SignalR, SignalR demo MAUI client for Windows, which is the same .NET MAUI application, but now deployed for Windows. I can do that too, so I can say Gerald Windows and say hey again, and I hide my button, and you should be able to see it shows up here, it shows up here. This one disconnected for some reason. I'm not gonna bother doing that again, but you can see that it shows up on all of these different things, right? Whether it's .NET MAUI native, Blazor hybrid, it doesn't matter. It's all connected to that same hub, and you can see it all come together here. All right, couple of last things. Let's, I can still click this. All right, seems to work. So almost ready for lunch. Um, we have this other little video, which is Sean and James Montemagno. You probably know him if you've been looking into .NET MAUI or other .NET MAUI stuff. There is a session from .NET Con focus on MAUI from somewhere last year, where he's also showing off a couple of great things where you can have this little drawing application. So it's actually a game. So on the left side, you can see, hey, you should draw a house, and you can start drawing it with a couple of colors. And on the right side, you have like not the actual thing, of course, that you have to guess, but you have this little box on the bottom where box face, I don't know how he came up with that. You have to kind of like guess whatever is being drawn, right? And this is in remote times. Sean and James were, Sean is from the UK, James was in Seattle in the studio. So they were in two separate locations, but they were still able to play this game, which is one of the things that you could do with .NET MAUI and SignalR. Now, I thought it would be cool, and this is a very poor video, especially compared to how cool this looks like from my house. I don't know why I did it with my own phone from a screen, because you have screen recording software. But anyway, and we were redoing our house as well, so it looks a little bit funny. Anyway, um, I should prepare this better more next time. So here you can see on the right, you can see the application, but now running on macOS by Sean. So I just pulled down his repository, he made it open source, and I thought, how cool would it be if I could hook that up to the Blazor web client as well, right? So in the background, you can see the Blazor web thing with that, and it's drawing on a canvas and that kind of stuff. Again, with SignalR, you can see it showing up in real time, near real time, and I can enable also the game playing on the web basically. So that is another cool scenario. A little bit more polished example is the .NET Podcasts, which is a big application, has server components, microservices, all kinds of cool stuff, which is really a reference for us. We use this for benchmarks, new features that we're trying out. So you can definitely go check this out as well. Uses a bunch of SignalR. The .NET MAUI stuff is built twice. So we have one .NET MAUI native application with all native components, and we have a .NET MAUI Blazor client, which does everything in Blazor, shares code with like the web application. That's definitely something cool to check out if you're interested in what the differences are and how that is used and applied in a more real world scenario. With all these options, I get a lot of questions like, hey, what is oh, that's subtle. Your time is up, someone says. Yeah. Sorry at home if your ears are now bleeding. So with all these options, like we have this little graph, like, hey, what should you choose when? If you're going for reach, basically everything that runs a browser. So your fridge has a browser nowadays. I don't know. You can go with Blazor, right? If as long as it has a browser, you can run a web application. You can run Blazor. In the middle, if you have maybe an existing Blazor application already and you want to reuse some of that code, you can go with Blazor and Maui and also go the cross-platform route. If you really want the power of a platform, then you can go with, depending on your scenario, with Maui, WinUI if you want Windows only, WinForms, WPF if that's still something that you can use. But that leverages really the power of the platform that you want to run on. Thank you so much. It was a few hurdles here and there, so I hope you will forgive me. But I hope that you still learned something here, and at least we had a laugh. So I'm here around for some questions. I don't know if you want to do more questions because I'm already over time, but fine, I'm ready. Let's go.
Wasn't your fault.
It wasn't my fault.
It's a technical stuff we have,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Always an issue. And also sorry for everyone. There was a fire alarm, a brief fire alarm. I hope you still can use your ears. We barely can.
What?
So let's try a few questions. Can you avoid magic strings in Citysync? And this is a hot one because many people want to know this.
Okay, interesting. I'm not entirely sure if there is an option right now. As far as I know, you can't. But I will figure it out. I will make a video on my YouTube channel
Huh?
about it. Maybe if there's a lot of questions about it.
Which is a great
Which
YouTube
oh,
channel.
thank
So,
you, thank
yeah.
you. Not that I know of right now, but I will definitely look into it if that's something that's interest of a lot of people.
Awesome. And then we have one. We're currently using Maui Blazor Hybrid. What native mobile functionality can we expect to lose out on by following the Blazor Hybrid path rather than the full native Maui SAML path?
Interesting question. Technically nothing. So the only thing that you're replacing basically is like the UI. So instead of using XAML and translating everything as from the abstract .NET MAUI layer to whatever that should look like the loading spinners, right? If you're going to use Blazor Hybrid, then you're basically replacing everything with web views, right? So it's going to look like a web application, and that you can style that however you want, right? So you can make it look like native if that's what you want, or you can make it pixel perfect the same across platforms. And what you get kind of for free, because that includes Bootstrap and all kinds of CSS stuff, so you will get the responsiveness of all the things. But in terms of native functionality, like the XAML has to be interpreted as well. The HTML too, it has to be rendered, so that kind of like performance is going to be probably very much the same. And in terms of all the rest, you can still reach out to all the APIs from the essentials things. You can format your hard drive, like I said. You can do the flashlight. You can do the geolocation. You can do all of that with Blazor Hybrid as well as the .NET MAUI stuff. So the only difference is that how your UI looks like, basically.
Nice. Can we run SignalR in Android background services? Is it power efficient?
It's not power efficient, probably, because it's a process that's running in the background. I think technically you totally can. If you should want it, is a different question. So that's basically the answer. Yes, you can, but I think you should really wonder if that's something that you want to do.
If you have a cold house, like Sam
Yeah,
uses his Mac
yeah.
for, yeah,
You buy a
heating.
couple of Android phones. You
Yeah,
run SignalR in the background.
that sounds
Free
good.
heating. Yeah,
Well, I don't wouldn't say free.
free. Yeah,
You will get heating.
yeah.
Okay, so one last. Would you recommend migrating a production project from Xamarin Forms to Maui?
Yes, of course. I mean, it all depends, right? The Xamarin Forms is still supported until May 2024, so you have some time. But in that time, iOS updates are going to get out. Stuff is going to happen. So the sooner you can get to .NET MAUI, the better, I would say, or at least start the path and inspect what are kind of like the hurdles that you might run into. It very much depends on how complex your project might be. If it's like a day's work or maybe a week's work. But yeah, I I would say .NET MAUI is ready. So at least give it a go. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. I see David is there, always ready for feedback as well. So reach out to me to start with, and I will connect you to the right people. And we've already transitioned a lot of or at least started the path to transition production apps. So yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Oh, we have
No.
one more question.
Are you ready for lunch? No, that's not it.
All right,
Okay.
we have one more question from the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel.
Interesting.
I need code push with MAUI. Maybe perhaps not a question, but so what's up with that?
I think, David, I don't know. Do you know what that is? That's like you're updating your app outside of App Center, right? Here's David. He knows the answer to this question.
Yeah, so code push with MAUI, if you're talking about pushing .NET code without having to redeploy your application to the store, which is what they're talking about. That's what code push usually means. It is possible. We have supported a couple of customers in doing that. I wouldn't say it's easy. It's not something that we have productized and made easy for people to do. So if that's something you really want to do there, we could assist. The other side of it is if you're thinking, well, the Blazor is web tech, and so where I've seen code push used before, it's with web tech. So would that path be any easier? The Blazor code is all compiled with .NET in your running application. There's nothing on a server anywhere to push to it. So you could set up something for yourself. We have a lot of customers that do dynamic UI, which is effectively code push, because you're essentially saying, I'm going to keep some representation of my app in a server somewhere, whether it's database or whatever, and then I'm going to dynamically render it with my application. So there are ways to get to it. It's not a here's the code push plugin for your application, but you totally can do it.
And I think there's also like the app stores typically don't really like that, right? So if you're going to go to like it's sketchy, yeah, because especially like Apple, I know they don't they have this review process, and they really want to see your application up front, and they don't really like whenever it's going to change outside of their control, right? So if you're distributing it outside of the App Store, this might be something. But if you're thinking like, hey, I want to go to the public App Store to the consumers, this might also not be something for you. So all things to consider.
Nice. Okay, so we will be back in about an hour. On the hour, I should say. I don't want to say a time. It's 1 o'clock in Sweden, but within an hour, we will be back. But before we go, I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, Progress Telerik. And with all this talk about Blazor, they have amazing Blazor UI components, over 100 truly native UI components. So probably they have what you need. So check them out, because if they weren't here, this wouldn't be possible. So with that, thank you so much. See you in an hour.